Her name was Elena. The day he left, there was no fight, no storm, just silence. He stood by the door, suitcase in hand, and simply said, "I'm not in love anymore." Then he left. Elena didn't cry right away. She stood still in the middle of the living room, surrounded by echoes of laughter, memories in frames, and furniture they had chosen together. She stared at the door for a long time, expecting it to open again. It never did. The first night was the hardest. The bed felt enormous. Every creak in the house reminded her of his absence. The kitchen held his favorite mug. The closet still carried his scent. Grief didn't scream. It whispered quietly, relentlessly. But beneath that silence, something else stirred. Not rage, not revenge. Something older, stronger. A question she had buried for too long. Who am I without him? And so, she lit a candle. Not for mourning, but for awakening. It was time to begin again. Not to erase the past, but to reclaim herself. The days that followed were quiet, but not the comforting kind. They were filled with empty hours and reminders. Elena woke up each morning expecting to hear his footsteps or the hiss of the coffee machine. Instead, she was met with a silence so thick it pressed down on her chest like a weight. She didn't tell anyone right away. She went to work as usual, smiled when she had to, nodded in meetings. But when she came home, she dropped the mask at the door. She sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at nothing. Some nights she poured 2 glasses of wine out of habit. Some nights she curled up on the couch, hugging a pillow that smelled like him. But grief, as she learned, was not linear. It came in waves. And when the first wave passed, Elena found herself standing on the shore, drenched but not drowned. One morning, she opened the closet and packed his remaining things, not in rage but in reverence for closure. Each shirt folded was a chapter ending. Each drawer cleared was a silent farewell. Then, she did something small but significant. She rearranged the furniture. She moved the couch, shifted the bookshelf, took down a picture frame. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about making space. For air. For light. For herself. And in that space, new habits began to form. She started going on early morning walks. The stillness of dawn made her feel connected to something ancient and quiet inside her. She enrolled in a pottery class, not because she was good at it, but because it required her hands to move, her mind to rest. At night, she journaled. It began with confusion, pain, and questions. Why wasn't I enough? Did he ever really love me? Who am I now? But slowly, those questions transformed. What do I want to learn? What makes me feel alive? What do I love about me? One entry stood out among the pages. It read, "I was not broken, I was cracked open." Elena realized that his leaving had exposed parts of herself she had neglected, dreams she had postponed, boundaries she had never drawn, strengths she had silenced to keep peace. She hadn't just lost someone. She had lost herself in someone. And now, she was finding her way back. She started saying no to unnecessary obligations, to people who drained her, to the voice inside her that still whispered she wasn't enough. And in saying no, she discovered a deeper, more powerful yes, to freedom, to rest, to rebuilding. It wasn't glamorous. There were no grand gestures, no cinematic epiphanies, just a woman choosing, day by day, to come back to herself. To eat alone and feel full, to sleep alone and feel safe, to walk alone and not feel lonely. She still missed him sometimes. But the ache was no longer sharp. It was a soft echo, a reminder not of what she lost, but of what she survived. And survival, she was learning, was just the beginning. The real story was in the rising. There came a day, subtle, unmarked on the calendar, when Elena looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. But this time, not because she seemed broken or lost, she looked radiant, clear-eyed, unapologetically real. Her hair was different now, cut shorter, a decision made on a rainy Thursday with no fanfare, just the quiet resolve to shed something old. The woman staring back at her no longer dressed for someone else's gaze. She wore softness and steel in equal measure. Her silence no longer held shame. It held power. But self-reinvention wasn't about external changes. The biggest shift was internal. She had started writing again. Not in a journal hidden away in drawers, but in the open. Essays, reflections, pieces that she posted anonymously online. To her surprise, people began responding. Strangers from across the world sent messages. "I feel this too. Your words helped me leave him. Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone." It was as though her pain had been composted into something fertile. Her story, once a private wound, had become a map for others still wandering in the dark. And yet, there was still fire to face, because one evening, when she least expected it, he called. His name lit up her screen like a match held to dry paper. Her chest tightened, breath caught halfway. She didn't answer. Not at first. She walked around her apartment, palms sweating, memories rushing in like a tide. Then, slowly, deliberately, she picked up. "Hi," he said. His voice was familiar, still charming, still calm. "I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." She didn't rage, didn't crumble, didn't cry. She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I'm doing better," she said, "since you left." There was silence on the other end. He spoke again. Apologies, half-explanations, sentences with gaps too wide to fill. He wanted to catch up, maybe meet for coffee, maybe reconnect. But Elena didn't need closure anymore. She had become it. She told him the truth, not to hurt him, but to honor herself. "I loved you. Deeply. I gave you the best parts of me. But I won't hand you what I rebuilt just because you're lonely." And then she hung up. No drama, no bitterness, just peace. That night, she lit a single candle and sat by the window. The flame flickered gently, casting soft shadows on her walls. It reminded her of who she had become. Not a woman waiting to be chosen, but one who had already chosen herself. The fire hadn't burned her. It had refined her. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. Not just within Elena, but around her. People began to notice. Not her haircut, not her clothes, but her energy. There was a steadiness to her now. She no longer rushed to fill silences or explain herself. She no longer laughed to ease tension or shrank to make others comfortable. She had become someone who took up space, not with noise, but with presence. One of her friends, a woman named Mara, pulled her aside after brunch and said, "You look different, lighter, like you're no longer carrying someone else's weight." Elena smiled. "I finally put it down." But healing wasn't just about letting go. It was about remembering what had been forgotten. The dreams Elena had tucked away in drawers long ago, travel, painting, public speaking, began to whisper to her again. And this time she listened. She took a solo trip to Portugal. It wasn't glamorous, no flowing dresses or perfect sunsets. Just her, a journal, and unfamiliar streets that felt like freedom. She got lost on purpose. sat in cafes with books, took photos of peeling paint and weathered doors, and on a quiet hill overlooking the ocean, she cried, not from pain, but from a strange, aching joy. For the first time in years, she wasn't performing. She was simply being. When she returned, she enrolled in a storytelling course at the local university. On the first day, her voice trembled as she introduced herself. By the third week, she was speaking about grief, love, loss, and rebirth. Her classmates listened in stillness, not out of politeness, but reverence. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, said after her reading, "You don't just tell stories, you invite people home to themselves." It struck her deeply, because that's exactly what she had done for herself. Come home. Not to an address, not to a man, but to the woman inside her she had silenced for too long. She started mentoring younger women who were going through breakups, helping them rediscover their voices, not with cliché advice or quick fixes, but with truth. She'd say, "You're not broken, you're being reshaped." And each time she said it, she believed it more for herself, too. By now, the man who left her had become a memory. Not bitter, not glorified, just closed. A chapter she had read all the way through. She no longer replayed their moments or analyzed their ending. She had outgrown that story. What remained was a woman who had walked through fire, stood in her ashes, and planted new seeds. She didn't wait for someone to find her. She found herself, and in doing so, she unlocked something more powerful than any love story. A life fully, fiercely her own. The seasons changed, and so did Elena. Winter gave way to spring, and the soft air that drifted through her open windows carried with it not memories, but possibilities. Her home, once a museum of what was, now pulsed with life. Plants flourished by the windowsill. Books with dog-eared pages were scattered across the table. Candles burned low each night as she journaled, painted, or simply sat in the quiet, no longer afraid of it. There was no rush to fill her life with people or things. She wasn't chasing distractions. She had learned the rare art of being alone and not being lonely. In fact, solitude had become her sanctuary, a place where she listened to the faint voice of her intuition, once buried beneath the noise of everyone else's expectations. She still dated from time to time. There were kind men, curious conversations, laughter under city lights. But she no longer twisted herself into smaller shapes to be loved. She didn't audition for affection. She didn't shrink to fit. If a man couldn't meet her as an equal, if he couldn't respect the woman who had rebuilt herself brick by brick, she let him go without apology. One night, while watching the rain fall outside her kitchen window, her phone lit up with a message. It was from a woman she'd once mentored. "I left him. I chose me. Thank you for showing me it was possible." Elena stared at the screen for a long moment, her heart soft. This was her becoming, echoed in others. Her pain hadn't been wasted. It had become a lantern for those still stumbling through their own darkness. She realized she had become the woman she once needed, the one who would have held her broken self with both compassion and truth, the one who didn't need rescuing because she had rescued herself. And yet, she was no longer hardened. Her strength didn't come from walls. It came from roots. She had learned to bend, not break. To love without losing herself. To stand firm even when the world shifted. There was power in that kind of woman. Quiet power. Not loud, not performative, but undeniable. One evening, at a small bookstore event, she was invited to read one of her essays. The room was full of strangers, warm light, and the scent of old pages. She stepped up to the microphone, took a deep breath, and read aloud a line she had once written in solitude. I was left, but I didn't break. I rebuilt, and I am more now, not despite the ending, but because of it. The room fell into stillness, and for a moment, Elena saw it in their eyes. The reflection of their own broken pieces, their own quiet rebuildings. She closed the journal, smiled, and stepped down, not to applause, but to connection. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not a return to what was, but a journey into what you were always meant to become. One quiet afternoon, while sorting through a box of old notebooks and photos, Elena came across something unexpected. A letter she had started writing the week after he left. It was folded neatly, tucked between pages of a journal she no longer used. The paper was slightly yellowed, her handwriting rushed and raw, like a wound bleeding onto the page. She sat down, heart steady, and began to read. I don't know why you left so easily. Maybe you were never really here. Maybe I loved enough for both of us, and that's why I couldn't see the cracks. Maybe I knew all along, and stayed anyway. I wish you'd said something sooner. I wish you'd looked at me one last time like I mattered. But more than anything, I wish I hadn't forgotten myself trying to remember you. Elena placed the letter in her lap. She didn't cry. She didn't ache. She simply breathed. This wasn't a wound anymore. It was a scar, healed, painless, but never forgotten. She thought about sending it once, back when she still needed him to understand. But now, she realized the letter had never been for him. It was always for her, a monument to who she was before she remembered her worth. She folded it again and placed it back where she found it. Not to hide it, but to honor it. Like a museum keeps ancient pottery, fragile, important, but no longer used. That night she wrote a new letter. This one began, Dear me, you didn't deserve the silence. You didn't deserve the weight of his absence or the way you blamed yourself. But you carried it. And you didn't just survive. You created something beautiful from it. She signed it. With love always, Elena. This new letter, she pinned to her bedroom wall. It became a daily reminder, not of what she lost, but of what she chose to become. Not of abandonment, but of return, to self, to strength, to wholeness. In the following days, she began writing letters to others too. Not to send, but to speak the truths no one had spoken to them. You are not hard to love. They were simply not ready for someone so real. You can begin again, even if the ending wasn't fair. You are allowed to be both hurt and healing, both grieving and growing. These letters, she began reading aloud at events, sharing in videos, posting in quiet corners of the internet. And the world responded. Thousands of strangers whispered the same thing back. I needed this. It was no longer just her story. It was a collective ache, a shared healing, a chorus of women and men who had rebuilt after being left behind. And Elena? She wasn't a symbol, not a savior, just someone who had lived through the fire and came out softer, braver, and unshakably whole. The girl who once waited for a knock at the door had now opened every door herself. Years had passed. Elena no longer measured her life by the memory of him. In fact, on most days, she didn't think of him at all. Not with bitterness, not even with longing. Just a quiet detachment, the kind that only comes when you've truly moved on. Not just from someone, but from the version of yourself who once clung to them. Her life had taken on a rhythm of its own. She had her rituals, morning walks with coffee in hand, late-night journaling under warm lamplight, weekend hikes with friends, impromptu conversations with strangers that often turned profound. She laughed more now, deep belly laughs that came from a place of peace, not performance. She had also become somewhat of a gentle force in her community, People sought her out, not for answers, but for presence. There was something in the way she listened, without judgment, without needing to fix, that made others feel safe. Seen. One evening, after a reading event, a young woman approached her, nervous, eyes shimmering. "You probably don't remember me," she said, "but I wrote to you after my divorce last year. Your video, it saved me." Elena smiled, gently touching the woman's hand. "I didn't save you. You did. I just reminded you it was possible." And that, Elena realized, was the quiet triumph of it all. Not fame, not praise, but the ripple effect of truth lived out loud. She had turned her pain into poetry, her wounds into wisdom, her silence into sanctuary, for herself and others. That was her legacy. One night, as the moon hung low and golden in the sky, she stood barefoot in her garden, surrounded by the soft hum of summer. Fireflies blinked like forgotten stars. The air smelled of lavender and rain-soaked soil. She closed her eyes. There was no longing, no emptiness, no ache for what could have been, only gratitude for what was, for what she had made from the ruins, for the woman she had become. She whispered to the sky, not as a prayer, but as a truth. "I was left, yes, but I didn't break. I rebuilt. And now, I am unshakably whole." The wind kissed her skin, and the world, in all its quiet beauty, nodded in agreement. If this story touched something deep inside you, if you've ever felt the sting of being left behind, only to rise stronger, know this: you are not alone. And your pain is not your end. It can be the beginning of something extraordinary. Sometimes, being broken is how we find the pieces of ourselves we never knew were missing. Sometimes, the silence after goodbye becomes the space where we finally hear our own voice. If Elena's journey reminded you of your own, or inspired the one you've yet to begin, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us your story. And if you know someone who needs this, someone standing at the edge of their own becoming, send this to them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we continue to tell stories that heal, empower, and reveal the strength we all carry. Because this isn't just a channel, it's a place for those who have been broken and chose to rebuild anyway.